pellets landing. In August and September 2015, Auckland Council airily spread 1080 poison across 21,000 hectares of the Hunua Forest Park. Enough poison was dropped across the Hunua Ranges to kill over 380,000 people. Well, prior to the drop taking place, were you informed about taking water or not taking water, or whether to disconnect your water supplies?
I was told that the drop wouldn't be anywhere near our waterways, rivers, streams and water coming into the property or anything. So I was told that they would drop well clear of the waterways.
The operational toxin flight chart obtained under the Official Information Act shows that 1080 poison was dropped directly into all streams flowing into the dams and into streams flowing out of the operational area. Small buffers were in place around the dams themselves. The poison is dropped to kill rats, possums, pigs and deer. The poisoned pigs, deer and possums that die in and near streams can cause delayed contamination and increased levels of E. coli as they decompose. Regional councils issue the resource consents that permit the discharge of poisoned bait directly into waterways. Waikato Regional Council is currently in the process of issuing a consent to DOC, TB Free and Waikato Regional Council that will allow them to continue to airily spread 1080 poison across forests and streams for another 35 years. The users of 1080 poison often claim that after testing, their water samples come back clear most of the time. However, in most cases, the testing process isn't following Landcare researchers' best practice guidelines, which state, samples taken within 8 hours of bait application are expected to provide the greatest likelihood of detecting any residual 1080. Most samples taken for testing by agencies are collected 24 hours or more after the aerial drop, and after the poison has already been uptaken by aquatic life and plants, or passed through the water column and diluted into larger water bodies like the Hunua dams. The flight charts of recent drops on the Coromandel Peninsula, Mount Pirongia near Hamilton, and around the Tauranga, Taupo and Waimarino rivers near Taupo all show the poison was dropped directly into waterways within the drop boundaries at the same rate as the land areas around them. In most cases, people living near the drop boundaries are not informed that the water they are drawing from the operational area has had 1080 poison dropped directly into it, or that they are entitled to mitigation. Negative water sample results don't prove the absence of 1080. They demonstrate poor testing protocols, methodology and processes, and/or inadequate testing equipment. Pesticide water testing in the United Kingdom is undertaken in parts per trillion. That is the way it should be in New Zealand, especially when there has been so little research into the low-dose effects of 1080 on humans. Tell us, where are we?
So we're at the Wairoa Dam, which is 5 minutes up the road from my place, and this feeds into 60% of the Auckland city's drinking water. I'm a nurse, my husband's an anaesthetist. We are concerned about the possible effects from 1080 in our drinking water. We're aware that it can be an endocrine disruptor at parts per trillion, and the water care tested at parts per billion. So, and where's the research to say that it doesn't affect us, it doesn't hurt us, it doesn't have any impact on our health? I'd like to know where that research is. We're worried.
People claim that 1080 has been studied to death. Well, it's absolutely not true. It hasn't been studied to death. It's been very well studied in certain areas of its toxicology, but it's been very poorly studied in other areas. And some of these other areas are really important. And one of those is hormone disruption. We know that hormone disruptors can be effective in parts per trillion, way even below parts per billion. And 1 part per trillion would be the same as if you're making a gin and tonic. It'd be 1 drop of gin, and you'd have to then have 660 milk tankers full of tonic to dilute it to 1 part per trillion. And parts per trillion are enough to disrupt hormone systems.
It would take 10,000 lakes the size of Taupo to dilute the annual drop of 1080 into New Zealand's forests to 4 parts per trillion.
So where are the cancer-causing or carcinogenicity studies? There aren't any. Where the reproductive studies, particularly focusing on female eggs, there aren't any. Where the developmental studies, early exposures to brain, immune system, there aren't any. Where the long-term chronic exposure studies looking at mitochondrial DNA content and mutation rates, there aren't any. There's a lot of doubts about the substance. It's dangerous.
Interestingly, with the studies that have been done on hormone disruption of 1080, the one that's been used by the Ministry of Health to set the safety standard in New Zealand was one of these studies which was like going through Wellington Harbour with a net with a mesh size as big as a house, because it only looked for gross morphological defects. Looking at the design of that experiment, I would conclude that it's not possible to come to any conclusion about the hormone disrupting capabilities of that toxin using that design, because it's just fundamentally flawed. Now, in fact, the design that was used for that experiment, I wouldn't even pass that research in an undergrad level of environmental studies at Victoria University, because it just wouldn't stack up.
In December 2008, the Ministry of Health released the following statement. Studies show that 1080 can cause fetal skeletal malformation, cardiomyopathy, damage to the heart muscle, and testicular effects, reduction in sperm count in animals. To date, there are no known epidemiological studies that have been carried out in relation to 1080 and potential adverse health effects on humans.
I think the question we have to ask is, who do we value? Do we value pregnant females and their unborn children, if it's a human, or their unborn birds, if it's a bird, or whatever? I mean, if we value these things, and if we're concerned about them, then we need to have a close look.